celebrate 50 years of JAYJAXON's fashion brilliance, I decided to put on an exhibition.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, baby, good morning.
Good morning.
Normally,
Welcome in.
are held on the second Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Thank you so much, Sora Brown. Sora, you have heard the body committee report given on behalf of the committee. Are there any questions at this time? Any questions?
welcome everybody who's been joining. We'll be getting started pretty soon. We're just waiting for everybody else to get here.
Commemorate 50 years of JAYJAXON's Fashion Brilliance, I decided to put on an exhibition.
All right, I want to welcome everybody in to the QHS's virtual exhibit hosted by Rachel Fenderson. We're going to be going over the Queens Historical Society's former exhibit on JAYJAXON, remembering him for his contributions to the fashion world. And I want to just really impress how happy we were to have this exhibit at QHS this last year. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, we weren't able to show it off as much as we had truly wanted to. But thanks to our efforts today, we're able to show it off one last time to the links. And I'm so happy to have you guys here. Before we get started, I want to introduce Paula Edme, Links chapter president, to give a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Greater Queens chapter of the Links Incorporated, I'm pleased to welcome you to the virtual tour of JAYJAXON, 40 Years of Fashion Design, Brilliance, Past and Future. Greater Queens chapter of the Links Incorporated, founded in 1996, is one of 295 chapters across the United States, the Bahamas, and the United Kingdom. We stand proudly with over 16,000 extraordinary African American women who work in friendship and service and are committed to enriching and sustaining and ensuring the culture and economic survival of African Americans and other persons of African ancestry. One of the areas of concentration of the Links Incorporated is the arts. And we work to enhance the education and expand the appreciation of the arts in all disciplines. We work to ensure that the disciplines of the arts is woven into the fabric of the educational experiences of young people and adults throughout Queens. While the women of the Links Incorporated are known for their hard work and impact we make in the lives of children and families, we are also known for being fashionistas. We love fashion. Therefore, it is fitting that this afternoon we will experience the genius and artistry of JAYJAXON, a native of Queens and a master of elegance and sophistication in his couture designs for women. Now I'm pleased to turn the program over to Rachel Fenderson. Ms. Fenderson is another sister, born and raised in Queens, New York. In addition to being the creative director, historian, and curator of the exhibit, which debuted in Paris, France at the Mona Bismarck American Center, she is a fashion designer in her own right, the founder of Pepper Jacques. Now, ladies, you must go to the website to experience this innovative luxury brand that features styles and designs that enhance the different female body types of all of us. She is a graduate of Hofstra University, Parsons School of Design, and has completed studies at Parsons Paris, the new school for design in Paris, France. Ms. Fenderson, we are ready to experience the life and brilliance of JAYJAXON.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, President Paula Edmey, for that lovely introduction. And now I'm actually going to share my screen so that we can get to enjoy JAYJAXON. "2020 was the 50th anniversary of JAYJAXON making history by becoming the first American and African American to be at the helm of a French couture maison, creating haute couture and pret-a-porter collections for Jean-Louis Cherrier. My ultimate objective is to ensure that JAYJAXON's legacy and contributions will forever be preserved in history, preserved through my exhibitions, scholarship, academic lectures, presentations, and forthcoming Jaxon biography. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Chinua Achebe's favorite African proverb. Jason Jackson threw his star into the universe, illuminating from his core the dream of our ancestors, radiating their hopes and blazing a path for more to follow. Quiet as is kept. Before there was Robin Rihanna Fenty for Fenty in 2019. Virgil Abloh for Louis Vuitton in 2018. Olivier Rostand for Balmain in 2011. Oswald Boateng for Givenchy in 2003. Sham Syndical member Patrick Kelly in 1988. There was JAYJAXON for Jean-Louis Cherrier in 1969. Jackson would make history by becoming the first American and African American to be the head couturier of a French couture maison. Here are some images of the collection. In the center, we have two models posing on the streets of Paris in large brim suede felt hats, paired with a belted wool knee-length coat and vinyl knee-length raincoat over dark-colored pants and shoes. On the far right, we have a single model, profile posed in the hallway, wearing a large brim hat, draped in a cape, placed over a shirt, tucked into a wide girdle belt with a cuffed wide leg pant, paired with dark colored shoes from the JAYJAXON Spring Summer 1970 collection for Maison Jean-Louis Charrier. By weaving a thread between specific events in fashion history, American history, Black history, and French history, my academic scholarships, exhibitions, lectures explores how racism permeated the fashion industry, all the while illuminating exclusionary narratives and tactics utilized to box designers in through racial labeling. Throughout my research, it was astounding that a minute amount of information was available about JAYJAXON as a designer. Over 50 newspaper articles were written and reprinted on JAYJAXON during his lifetime. The media proclaimed JAYJAXON to be the first American and African-American to create haute couture for Paris. Yet, JAYJAXON remained hidden in the fashion history and the historical discourse. Why is JAYJAXON not in the fashion historical narrative? Why is his history not taught? Who is disseminating history? Who are the gatekeepers? Who are the history recorders? Thus, illustrating JAYJAXON's penetration in the industry shows how social constructs and barriers obstructed his fashion trajectory in America and abroad. JAYJAXON experienced racism in the fashion houses of New York City, the haute couture houses of Paris, and when he moved to California. Now, let's start the virtual tour of the exhibition, JAYJAXON, 40 Years of Fashion Design Brilliance, Past, Present, Future. Featured here in a promotional photo is JAYJAXON, photographed at his atelier of the Maison Jean-Louis Charrier. The root of this exhibition celebrates the life of JAYJAXON as an American fashion designer, an haute couture designer, a costume designer. It examines Jackson's 40-year career through artifacts, objects displayed from his personal portfolio, as well as primary sources and interviews from the research of My Designer Archive. This exhibition has three key themes: exalting the past, burgeoning the present, vanguarding the future. These themes are also centered around 8 interviews I developed for the Portfolio Anthology docuseries featured in the exhibition. It shows the interviewees experiencing the original portfolio of JAYJAXON. Exalting the Past explores JAYJAXON's life from his childhood through his adolescent years. The parallel recorded interviews delves into JAYJAXON's past through the oral history of his lifelong friends, as well as their own careers within the industry. Featured is retired model, professor, fashion director, Miss Renee Hunter, and model, activist, Renal White. Both of these interviewees were great friends of JAYJAXON. The next theme, Version in the Present, examines JAYJAXON's life following his young adult years and the start of his fashion career in New York as a fashion designer and in Paris as an haute couture designer from the 1960s through the 70s. The parallel interviews conducted for this theme are the professors and a brand consultant who are already established in their career. Featured is fashion historian, professor at Parsons and Harvard University, curator, Dr. Jonathan Michael Square. In addition, professor at Parsons and curator Sebastian Grant. And lastly, global fashion brand consultant Ronnie Opong. So Vanguard in the Future delves into the final years of JAYJAXON's career as a fashion designer and costume designer, thus detailing his return to New York and ultimately his departure to California. The parallel interviews for these themes features the future of fashion. Fashion designer and founder Danielle Kellogg of Taste by Danny K, which is a lingerie brand for all sizes. Next is international fashion designer Isaiah Cargill, who graduated with the BFA of Parsons in Paris in 2019. His collection is currently being sold in Europe. Caress Dorsley. She is a fashion designer and her brand is women's wear brand 620 Style. The purpose of recording these industry professionals was to help to preserve and protect their legacies with the historical contributions of JAYJAXON. Let's answer this question. Who is JAYJAXON? Now we will enter room 1. In this part of the tour, you will see images of JAYJAXON as a toddler, his parents, his siblings, and his childhood home. JAYJAXON was born in the heart of the Jim Crow era to Mr. Sidney Jackson and Mrs. Ethel Reno Jackson on August 30th, 1941. Now, to give you context of the Jim Crow era, in order to help us to understand and frame the time period of JAYJAXON's formative years and early beginnings in fashion, I will present a series of footage from Raoul Peck's documentary, I Am Not Your Negro, as well as information on the Jim Crow era. Here is a clip featuring Dr. Pilgrim at the Jim Crow Racist Memorabilia Museum of Ferris State University in Michigan.
Jim Crow segregation was so pervasive that it was omnipresent, that it was in every aspect of American society. Every major societal institution, the family, the government, the media, the military, higher education, all major institutions in our society bought into the idea that whites were superior to blacks in all ways that mattered. In every day, in every aspect of the society, the racial hierarchy was cemented and manifested. For many Americans, when they think about what was Jim Crow, they think only of segregation laws. We know better than that. We know that Jim Crow included every aspect of society. However, the laws were an important part of Jim Crow. Laws that, for example, forbade African Americans and white Americans from playing checkers together, or being buried in the same cemetery, or fishing together, or doing anything that implied social equality. What we tried to do here was to put so many of those laws there that you really had a sense of how pervasive those laws were under Jim Crow. Some of those rules are codified into law. Some of them are norms that they're not laws, but they're just as real. So, for example, if you were in the Deep South or border states, you would have in constitutions and in local city ordinances laws that forbade certain behavior. But it is also the case that when you left the Jim Crow South and came north, that there were still practices. Sometimes they weren't codified into law, city ordinances, county ordinances. Sometimes they weren't laws in that sense. But trust me when I tell you that they limited interactions between African Americans and whites, that they limited opportunities for African Americans, and that a person, an African American, who violated those laws was punished.
Dr. Pilgrim is speaking directly to how JAYJAXON's world was affected from the time he was born. So much so that his siblings, Helen on the top left, Arlene on the top right, Sydney, his fraternal twin, on the bottom left, and Jaxon on the bottom right, had to ration food as children. Their father, who was college educated, was unable to get a job as a Black person. The irony here is that the same government which prohibited Sydney from getting a job tried to take their children away because they were hungry. Jackson's mother, Ethel, stopped this from happening and said that she'd rather that they be poor together than to be apart. Next, you will experience JAYJAXON's childhood home in South Jamaica, Queens, his home in St. Albans, and his place of worship. Displayed here are images of JAYJAXON's childhood homes in South Jamaica, Queens, and St. Albans. Featured on the left is his home located at 107-448 South Jamaica Housing Complex. On the right, you will see his adolescent home located on 199 and Murdoch Avenue. Jaxon attended PS 40, Jamaica High School, and Grace United Methodist Church. Now, you will experience images of Queens, New York, from the Queens Historical Society archival collection, starting from the early 1900s through the 1990s. Follow the images from the left to the right to see the progression of how major avenues and boulevards are modernized from dirt roads with horse and carriage to brick and asphalt, with the earliest cars in Jamaica, Queens. The photos displayed in the vitrine will allow you to see the world through the eyes of JAYJAXON's parents, Sydney and Ethel Jaxon, when they first arrived in Queens during the interwar period from 1918 through 1939. One of the key images displayed shows how Merrick Boulevard appeared in 1908, prior to the beginning of World War I. Once more, you will be able to now experience the world through the eyes of an infant JAYJAXON. Through his adult years, you will see the progression of how a neighborhood is fashioned over time. Pay special attention to the 1929 architectural illustration of Queens General Hospital. That is the hospital of JAYJAXON's birth. If we look at the time period Jaxon was born in the Jim Crow era, and when he moved to Paris in the Civil Rights era, it almost seems overtly obvious that he would have been written about extensively, considering the various obstacles and barriers to entry for a person of color. Now, you will see a clip from Raoul Peck's documentary, I Am Not Your Negro, of the Jim Crow South and microaggressive North, which are the impetus for the Civil Rights Movement.
White people are astounded by Birmingham. Black people aren't. White people are endlessly demanding to be reassured that Birmingham is really on Mars. They don't want to believe, still less to act on the belief that what is happening in Birmingham is happening all over the country. They don't want to realize that there is not one step morally or actually between Birmingham and Los Angeles.
After surviving this and ascending to the heights, JAYJAXON reached in the fashion world as a first. One would think he would have been cemented in the fashion historical narrative. Though it be a thrilling and marvelous thing to be merely young and gifted in such times, it is doubly so, doubly dynamic to be young, gifted, and Black. Lorraine Hansberry. Now I will discuss JAYJAXON's historical contributions. Jackson's fashion career began after designing a dress for his then girlfriend, Renee Hunter. Jaxon graduated from Hunter College, went to law school, and left to study fashion at FIT. During the late 60s in New York City, Jaxon designed for Joubert, Junior Sophisticates, Donald Brooks, and Klein for Royal Lynn. Jaxon sold his own pieces to luxury department stores such as Henry Bendel, Bonwit Teller, and Lord & Taylor, garnering enough money for him to pursue fashion in Paris. Now you are viewing a canvas that details Jackson's degrees and fashion creations from his own brand as they were sold in the prominent department stores of New York City. Next, you are able to experience a portion of Jackson's New York resume and his supportive family members. Let's join JAYJAXON on his journey as he leaves New York and enters Paris. JAYJAXON's family members, pictured here, saw him off at the airport for his trip to Paris, and they would not see him again until he returned approximately 8 or 9 years later. I go forth alone and stand as 10,000. Maya Angelou, our grandmothers. In February of 1968, JAYJAXON moved to France. The beginning of his career in Paris would commence a few months prior to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a prominent leader of the civil rights movement in America, and the May 1968 massive student-led protests in Paris. JAYJAXON gained a wealth of design knowledge by working for these couture maisons. Jean-Louis Cherrier as the head designer / assistant designer for Yves Saint Laurent, and Christian Dior for Marc Bohan as the assistant designer. After leaving his post as Jean-Louis Cherrier, Jaxon created his own brand, which was showcased at the American Cultural Center in October 1970. And once again, JAYJAXON would return to Jean-Louis Cherrier as his assistant designer, and then Grand Couturier. Now that I've given you the historical narrative on JAYJAXON's life in Paris, you will experience the ephemeral materials detailing JAYJAXON's life in Paris without audio in this part of the tour. The image on the right shows the apartment building where JAYJAXON initially stayed when he first moved to Paris. On the left is an image of correspondence between French couturier Givenchy and JAYJAXON, dated February 1968. The letter states the following: Dear Mr. Jackson, I safely received your letter dated February 5th and was very pleased to hear that you were in Paris. Of course, if you want to see the collection, you may come exactly when you like. But the only thing is that you are planning to come next Monday, and unfortunately, I will not be there. In fact, I'm leaving on Sunday, next for the mountain, to take some rest for a week. Anyway, my secretary, Miss Mahler, will take care of you and will let me know about your future address. With all the best, Givenchy. Let's experience more of JAYJAXON's history on the other side of the removable wall. Featured here is Jaxon creating collections under his own brand in his 100 square meter Parisian apartment in the 70s. Throughout his design process, Jaxon would develop his ideas, garments, and inspirations late at night. Now, we will enter JAYJAXON's fashion design world and play his favorite song that he would listen to while designing clothing. Please enjoy the audio of Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers.
Does he think the usual way? Maybe I shouldn't worry, but I've been through this before, and I'd like to get things straight before I'm knocking on your door. Does he know just what I am? She says for me. About your friends.
Jaxon literally turned Paris on its side with his presence, historical roles, designs, while ultimately putting cracks in the glass ceiling. The press would soon write their reviews of their perceptions of Jackson's stylistic intentions for his collections. In the spirit of being a true artist, a few months after the release of the 1970 collection, Jaxon would create costume designs for Le Ballet Poids Duma in April 1970 for the French film L'Odeur du Fous. Jaxon is credited as the costume designer for this movie, which premiered in February 1972. JAYJAXON's fashion career trajectory would continue to rise in the world of haute couture. We will now examine JAYJAXON for Jean-Louis Cherrer. Jaxon presented his collection for the Maison with a great selection of music to foster a particular ambiance, as well as diversity on the catwalk. Although the financiers did not want models who were Black to be featured on the runway, Jaxon maintained his stance and humanity prevailed. Now, let's zero in on a few of JAYJAXON's designs for Jean-Louis Cherrer. On the left, we have a single model profile posed wearing a scarf and a black coffee fringe dress, paired with black coffee colored thigh-hugging boots. And on the right, we have a single model frontal pose wearing a floor-length coat with a large bow tied at the center front neck of the mid-thigh blouse, placed over a ballooned wide-leg pant paired with light-colored shoes. Both garments are from JAYJAXON's Spring-Summer 1970 collection for Maison Jean-Louis Cherrier. Now, let's enter the design world of JAYJAXON for JAYJAXON. The image on the left shows model Lester Wilson, an unknown model, frontal pose, wearing a garment called the Peace Coat. The woman's wear gray jersey Peace Coat is a raglan sleeve, collarless, leather inlay floor-length coat that takes the shape of a square pink skirt from the waist down and is paired with the dark-colored boots. Now, for menswear, the long-sleeve men's Peace Coat is also detailed with a fur inlay collar and paired with a yellow jersey cuff pants over dark cherry brown shoes. Both ensembles are giving us an androgynous feel, as described by a fellow fashion designer, Isaiah Cargill. In the second photo, on the right, model Lester Wilson is profile posed, wearing an ensemble called the Knicker Kick. Featured here is a black felt hat with a brown suede waist-length jacket paired with black jersey knickers, long black knee-length socks, and dark cherry brown shoes for the feet. All of these pieces are from JAYJAXON's Pret-a-Porter collection, released in October 1970 at the American Cultural Center, which today we now know as the Mona Bismarck. Now you will experience JAYJAXON's designs above fireplace number 1 without audio. Here is a still to take in the essence of JAYJAXON's designs for Jean-Louis Cherrier, featured on the left, and JAYJAXON's creations for his own brand, featured on the right. Now, we will take a tour of the book display. Let's zero in on Victor H. Green, Charles A.R. McDowell, the Negro Motorist Green Book for a moment. I must notate the reason why this book is displayed. In this book, it lists safe havens for Black travelers, where they can stay, where they can grab a bite to eat, and where they could safely explore New York City. I thought it'd be imperative to clear up the misnomer that New York City is not racist. Nevertheless, these books gave me the tools to look at how language is utilized to demarcate, and in the same instance, to accept JAYJAXON, how the impacts of whiteness stunted his success, the implications of labor and designers by their race against the white backdrop places them on an unlevel playing field, and how power and systems of control are utilized to control the historical narrative. Additionally, it allowed for a critical assessment of the underlying issues within the fashion industry and how it relates to the history of America. Michel Foucault states in Power and Knowledge, it's not a matter of emancipating truth from every system of power, but detaching the power of truth from the forms of hegemony, social, economic, and cultural, within which it operates at the present time. To unpack this further, whose truth are we referring to? This exhibition's robust display of JAYJAXON's extensive historical contributions ultimately highlights the truth hegemonic historiographies does not produce, which negatively affects society, economics, culture, tolerance, and history preservation. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Langston Hughes, dreams. Now we will delve into Jaxon's life when he returns from Paris to New York. By the late 70s, Jaxon returned to New York City and once again created his own divisional collections while designing for Pierre Cardin, JAYJAXON for Benson and Partners, JAYJAXON for Juju, JAYJAXON for Celine Mooney, JAYJAXON for the New Pliers. Next, you will experience the virtual tour of New York / the California room without audio. A decision was made to leave Paris, mainly as a result of the racism Jaxon experienced while working in the couture maisons. He officially moved back to New York City in the mid to late 70s. Displayed here are JAYJAXON's designs for brands such as Juju, the New Pliers, Celine Mooney, and private clients. The Ebony Fashion Fair, which was produced by Ebony Magazine, would go on tour for 160 cities during the fall of 1977 and the spring of 1978. It features 200 designs and accessories handpicked by Mrs. Eunice Johnson, who was producer and the director of the shows. In this featured advertisement, it states that the proceeds from this Ebony show benefited the Iota Beta Omega chapter of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated College Scholarship Fund. Designers such as Stephen Burrows, Guy LaRoche, Scott Barry for Barry Sport, Chloe Ungaro, and JAYJAXON for Monet were walking down the runway. Featured on the right is an actual JAYJAXON for Monet garment. The model is partially frontal pose with one leg perched on a stool, wearing a belted midi-length, wide-leg collared jumpsuit from JAYJAXON's fall 1977 collection for Celine Mooney. In the 1970s, JAYJAXON moved on to the Maison Pierre Cardin, designing sportswear, dresses, suits, and denim for the American market. Jaxon made sure to collect tear sheets and sign his name to the designs he created that were being advertised in major magazines. This is how the historically absent and or omitted designers gives themselves auto agency after their career has ended and or they have passed on. The word auto agency means to help oneself preserve and safeguard their own legacy in history. This term was coined in my master's thesis. The acrylic panel here displays a 1970s Benson and Partners design. I enlarged from JAYJAXON's compilation of articles and advertisements he archived. Next, JAYJAXON fashioned theatrical costumes for many musical artists spanning numerous generations. Jaxon designed a dress for R&B singer Ashanti for her role on the television show American Dreams. And on the right, JAYJAXON's neighbor, for whom he made an emerald green fishtail prom dress. Displaying both a costume and a special occasion garment shows how JAYJAXON is multi-talented and his creativity is boundless. Now, we will experience Jaxon's history displayed above fireplace number 2. Jaxon proved to be a multifaceted designer, creating for brands that have vastly different aesthetics, creative techniques, cultural heritage, and style. In '76, Jaxon costumed Ailey Celebrates Ellington, presented by Alvin Ailey City Center Dance Theater. Although Jaxon took a break from the fashion industry, he would often design for private clients, creating wedding dresses and costumes for friends and celebrities. Displayed here are the costume illustrations and flats. Technical facts. Technical facts are the garments drawn without the body or figure. In the industry, this is what we would refer to as a tech pack, which usually has the production notes, fabric swatches, colors, measurements, and sizes. The tech pack is supposed to let the pattern maker and seamstress know how to make a garment for mass production. These garments were produced for Ailey Celebrates Ellington Festival at the request of Miss Sylvia Waters, who was the artistic director of Ailey's second company. So now we will move to Los Angeles. JAYJAXON will leave his birth home of New York City behind to chase his dreams in California. Finally, in the mid-'80s, Jaxon moved out to California at the persuasion of his play cousin, Lester Wilson, the renowned choreographer. While in Los Angeles, Jaxon designed for Jill Richards, created theatrical costumes for celebrities such as Thelma Houston, Diane Carroll, Sammy Davis Jr., and Luther Vandross. For television shows, he designed costumes for The Division, Angel, Ally McBeal, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. In film, Jaxon created costumes on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, The Men's Club, and in stage, Ailey Celebrates Ellington and The Colors of Christmas. The brief accounts of the events of JAYJAXON's life displayed here are significant achievements in fashion. From the onset, JAYJAXON's success in the fashion industry would appear to have been written about widely and researched in depth as his non-Black counterparts. Displayed here are images of JAYJAXON's home in California, his friend Lester Wilson, JAYJAXON's love and life partner Lloyd Hardy. JAYJAXON would quit the fashion industry for 10 years. During this time, he went back to school at USC. JAYJAXON made 2 Westcott vests for his life partner, Lloyd Hardy, in the mid-'80s. And now we will view the garments. Displayed in the garment vitrine on the right is a cream floral printed red Westcott vest adorned with gold floral buttons. In the opposite vitrine is another Westcott vest. You can see an image of JAYJAXON's life partner, Lloyd Hardy, wearing the black floral applique over a graduated green, purple, and blue colored vest. The couple was getting ready to attend a wedding. Next, you were able to see some of the garments JAYJAXON made for Salem the Cat from the TV show Sabrina the Teenage Witch, a patchwork denim blazer for his friend, Thelma Houston, wedding dresses for private clients, a portion of his costume design resume, as well as JAYJAXON pictured in LA. On July 19th, 2006, Jason Jaxon, formerly known as Eugene Jaxon, succumbed to a long battle with cancer. Jackson's remains were interred at his mother's gravesite in Springfield Gardens Cemetery, located in Queens, New York. Jaxon was survived by his eldest brother, William Robinson, sister, Helen Lee, sister, Arlene Patterson, his nieces and nephews, and his love and life partner, Lloyd Hardy. JAYJAXON's history in American fashion design, French haute couture, and costume design opened doors for a diverse set of designers to create their own legacies. When looking at the career of JAYJAXON and how racism had a huge impact on his trajectory in both the French and American fashion industry, his brilliance is not only in his creations, it is in his perseverance, talent, and permeation of the industry. JAYJAXON's legacy would live on through his work, resume, portfolio, family and friends oral history, obituary preserved by Lloyd Hardy, my academic master's scholarship, research, exhibitions, lectures, as well as this fashion retrospective presentation. In the end, the fashion industry lost a fashion great, quiet as it was kept. Now, I will perform a critical discourse analysis of the fashion industry, thus looking at the ideas of being both visible and invisible, while challenging language and narratives placed on designers of color. When I started the presentation, I utilized Toni Morrison's literary technique from her book, The Bluest Eye, regarding the colloquial saying, quiet as is kept, to problematize how designers of color are both known and unknown. Thus, designers who have received notoriety and designers who remain academically unacknowledged. Therefore, quiet as is kept functions as a double entendre laced in sarcasm. Now, we will see James Baldwin speaking to the issues that are harming the Black community regarding the lack of diversity, not seeing yourself represented, and ultimately waking up one day and realizing why you are being treated deplorably based on the color of your skin and existence.
Leaving aside all the physical facts which one can quote, leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, what this does to the subjugated is to destroy his sense of reality. This means, in the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, and since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you.
This magazine cover shows how people of color are both visible and invisible in the world. If we think about what James Baldwin just said in the parallel to the impetus for this magazine issue, which was motivated by the presidential race run by the now ever first African-American president of the United States, Barack Obama, it cannot be lost in you that the fashion industry has a huge problem with the lack of diversity. Why 2008? Think about this for a moment. Vogue initially launched their magazine in 1892, which at one point was released in bi-weekly issues. It took 116 years to have an issue like this. I am briefly scratching the surface with the problems regarding this magazine issue. This magazine issue now serves as a guide of how not to approach diversity, inclusivity, and representation. Instead of advocating for women of color who are Black in an uplifting way, Vogue Italia places them on an unlevel pedestal versus positioning them equally next to their counterparts and in a consistent manner. So pretty much, this was a one-off magazine and it never happened again. It was never produced again. The Vogue issue is not a safe space in terms of diverse representation. Here, I offer Ebony and Jet magazines, which flourished during JAYJAXON's life and were deemed safe spaces. Ebony magazine was released on November 1st, 1945 by John Johnson, 4 years after JAYJAXON was born. Jet was released its first issue on November 1st, 1951. These magazines were created to present a constructive narrative about Black people in the world and to combat negative, hateful stereotypes based in racism. Now I will discuss the setup of this exhibition and how it is a form of legacy preservation in other organizations who were doing the work. In 2019, I was able to land and then produce this exhibition titled JAYJAXON, 40 Years of Fashion Design Brilliance, Past, Present, Future. Last year, February, for the 50th anniversary of JAYJAXON's historical role, this exhibition opened during the first week of Black History Month and in the heart of New York Fashion Week at the Queens Historical Society and was on display until December 29th, 2020 by appointment only due to COVID-19. JAYJAXON's historical contributions to fashion were displayed on 10 acrylic panels, 17 canvases, 32 written content canvases, 8 recorded video portfolio interviews, a record player belting out JAYJAXON's favorite songs with ephemeral materials, 11 theory and history fashion-based books, and 2 Westcott vests from my research archive, as well as images of queens from the Queens Historical Society's archive. I wanted this exhibition to reach audio as well as visual learners. My goal was to make it an immersive experience. All of the graphics, texts, brochures, wall decals, and postcards I built from scratch in Illustrator and Photoshop. I selected the paint, which was based on JAYJAXON's favorite colors. This exhibition is broken up into 2 rooms, the New York/Paris room, which is the black and gold room, and the painted with 2 different stencils, and the New York/California room, which is painted in Parisian taupe with gold stencil overlays. Lastly, it is important for me to discuss the present generation who is also doing the work to protect the histories of our ancestors and the stories of the present and the future of fashion. These companies are doing the work of elevating and protecting the legacies of designers in the present. I will read to you their missions and aspirations for people of color and Black people. Harlem Fashion Row, founded by Brandis Daniels, is an influential arts and entertainment organization that engages audiences and aligns brand partners with emerging designers of color in fashion. The Kelly Initiative is a diversely ranging coalition of Black professionals committed to no longer allowing many of the best and brightest talents to go deliberately ignored, obstructed, or erased by the industry's prioritizations of optics over the authentic pursuit of equity. Black Owned Everything, founded and curated by Zarina Akers, for when the trend is over. Zarina uses media to highlight Black-owned brands. The Black Fashion Council, founded by Lindsay Peoples-Wagner. She is the former editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue, with Sandrine Charles, a communications consultant. Their mission is to represent and secure the advancement of Black individuals in fashion and beauty. They currently have 70+ companies who have signed a 15% pledge ensuring opportunities for Black people. And finally, the Fashion and Race Database, founded by curator and professor Kimberly Jenkins, is an online platform filled with open source tools that expand the narrative of fashion history and challenge misrepresentation within the fashion system since 2017. Fashion and Thyself in Slavery and Freedom, founded by curator, historian, and professor Dr. Jonathan Michael Square, explores the intersections between slavery and fashion. This digital humanities project is also an entry point for exploring larger questions of race, identity, and equity. Black Fashion History Podcast, founded by Taniqua Rush, celebrates the past and present contributions of Black people around the world to the luxury fashion industry. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. James Baldwin. Thank you, everyone, for joining my exhibition tour and experiencing the historical cultural significance of JAYJAXON. Detailed on the right is my contact information. That includes my email address and my website if you'd like to reach out to me or connect. Detailed on the left is the Queens Historical Society's address, their website, and phone number in case you want to see future exhibitions. Okay, now let's join us for some Q&A questions.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was a wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
I encourage everybody to please ask any questions you might have. I'll be reading in the chat to see any questions, and I'll read them out to Rachel so she can answer them as best as she can. If somebody right now has one that they want to ask over voice, we can start off the first one through voice if you guys don't want to type it out. But going forward, I'll read them out so that way we don't have people talking over each other. All right, we've got one from Jasmine. What was the most fascinating finding that your research uncovered?
That's a toughie because so many things were so fascinating. Let me think on this one for a moment.
Can I also steer the question towards two different kinds of discoveries, like
Sure.
Most interesting discovery of JAYJAXON's contribution, and maybe also something interesting about the events that happened to JAYJAXON?
Oh, sure thing. Okay. So I would say regarding his contributions to fashion, I think the most interesting discovery for me was to see how multi-talented he is. Being that in order for you to design for all of these different types of brands, you have to get a sense of their history, what that brand means to the public, what that brand currently wants to present to the world, and also to make sure this brand can generate income and I guess money off of what you are producing and designing. And the fact that he was also doing this in tandem with producing other collections, I thought it was super interesting because in order for a designer to do something like this, I think you have to step out of one mode of one brand, step into another mode of another brand. So for me, it was just so interesting to see how multi-talented and multifaceted he is. So that I guess that'll be my answer to his contributions. And I guess you said in regards to the experiences of things that happened to him. You know, there was a story of a company that I didn't quite talk about, but they are featured. The brand is called Fuchs. When I met with JAYJAXON's former partner in Paris, he explained to me some of the things that JAYJAXON experienced, and one of them was that when he worked for the brand Fuchs, he had to work in the off hours. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? Why would he have to work in the off hours? That is the strangest thing I've ever heard of. Like, wouldn't it make sense if you are a designer to be able to work with the team and to be able to build on those ideas and creations? Well, the JAYJAXON's former partner said that, well, Rachel, they were concerned that the staff wouldn't want him to be there and would be upset by him being there. So he would create the patterns and garments when no one was present in the off hours. That to me was super hurtful to hear that. And I can't imagine if you are a fashion designer and this is your world and this is what you love to do, and to think that somebody wouldn't want to be around you. And I could only imagine that it has to do with Blackness and homophobia.
Very true. So we've got another question here from Cynthia. It comes in two parts. What was your inspiration to pursue this project, and what other projects would you be interested in pursuing as well?
Oh, sure. So I can tell you. Okay, so I'm also a fashion designer, and when I went to Parsons, New York in 2008, this is right after I graduated from House University. I didn't see any designers who looked like me when I was doing some research on fashion designers. And then I came across JAYJAXON and I saw that he was from Queens. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm from Queens. And I was like, okay, well, that's all the information that I saw on him. Okay. So then fast forward about, I would say about 8 years. This is when I decided to go to Parsons in Paris. And I was studying fashion and history there. The curriculum and content, I called it whiteness studies. It did not include other people of color. I thought this was the strangest thing ever because fashion, everyone creates fashion. Everyone is present in fashion, and so what I would often do is challenge the historical narrative while in class, like while we were reading these articles. I would challenge the teachers on this. They're the professionals and they're teaching me, but oftentimes I found that I'd have to bring in content to teach them as well. And I would include everyone. Like it wouldn't only be people who are Black. I would include Latinos, and I would include Asian people. And I just thought it was super interesting that these people were not being talked about in the way that they should have been, especially because some of these people were at these fashion houses in Paris. So to me, that was an editing of history and removing them from the narrative. Now, when it comes to JAYJAXON, I wrote a paper about 4 designers of color who were cultivating businesses during the Jim Crow era. And so the first designer was Elizabeth Keckley. She actually created garments for Mary Todd Lincoln, which is Lincoln's wife. And she started her own business, and she was able to free herself and her son off of making garments during slavery. So I just thought her story was super fascinating to me, that she utilized her techniques and her skill sets, created a business during slavery, and found agency. And she also told her own story by writing her own autobiography. So she was super fascinating to me. Next was Anne Lowe. Anne Lowe is actually the designer who created garments for a lot of the people that we know, such as the Rockefellers, the Kennedys. She made a garment. She made the wedding dress, actually, of Mrs. Kennedy. And it was super interesting because Vogue magazine, what they would often do is leave her name off of her designs intentionally, because they thought that their audience wouldn't want to know that a Black person created these garments. I mean, that is literally erasure happening in the magazines. I just thought it was super deplorable. Then we went on, we had Arthur McGee. Arthur McGee is called the king of 7th Avenue. He was creating a bunch of garments. This is during the height of when 7th Avenue and the fashion district was really bubbling and becoming bigger and greater. And, I was learning about all of these things. Never once were any of these people mentioned at all during the story of America or Paris. And I found this to be alarming. Then I came across JAYJAXON, and JAYJAXON, he had the least amount of information written on him. And so, when I was coming around to my thesis time, one of my professors, the professor who actually taught this class, she's like, Rachel, what are you going to be interested in writing about? And I had a bunch of ideas, including JAYJAXON. She's like, so are you going to think about JAYJAXON, considering that he had the least amount of garments? And I was like, sure, professor. She's like, I'm not trying to tell you what to write. And I was like, okay, sure you are. But I'm happy that she pushed me in this direction, because it really allowed me to unpack and unearth so much information on JAYJAXON. And then when I found out that JAYJAXON literally lived a few blocks away from my old house in St. Albans, I lived at 115 201st Street. And I also went to Grace United Methodist Church. It was so fulfilling, and it meant so much to me to know that someone who was from my neighborhood was able to make it in the fashion industry, and that, that served to let me know that my dreams are valid, that they're not far away from me, and they're not something that I can't reach. Especially for him, he was doing this during the Jim Crow era. So yes, that's your question.
So Michelle has a question on what was his favorite piece to design? Coats, skirts, dresses? I know he did a lot of women's fashion.
He did a lot of women's fashion. And one of the things I didn't mention is that he loved to make garments for women who were of the largest sizes. I suspect, and he was actually ahead of his time with this, because people weren't really considering or making garments for larger women. Usually what they would do is make a garment and then size it up, without considering factors such as arms, your waist, your hips, your shoulders. Those type of things fit differently, and maybe also silhouettes fit differently as sizes get bigger or even smaller. So I think that one of the things I think that he loved to make would have been garments for a plus size brand, and that's actually what he was working on right before he passed away.
Okay, and Tanya asks where are his collections now, now that he's passed on?
Okay, so I've seen about 20 to 30 of JAYJAXON's garments, but they're with friends. The garments for Jean-Louis Charrier, I did reach out to them. I, sent them an email. I wrote them personal letters when I was in Paris. But those garments are actually owned by Hermès, because Hermès bought Jean-Louis Charrier, so they own that company, and it would be in that archive. So presently, it's something that I am working on. It's a goal that I want to try to see those garments in person. I'm pretty sure they still have them. But the garments for his friends and family, he made those garments personally for them. So when I flew to California, Lloyd introduced me to Thelma Houston, to Velma Cotto, and these people had tons of JAYJAXON's garments. So he made suits, skirts, pants, fur, and all of the things he made was by hand. I don't know who sews fur by hand. I mean, that's fascinating to me to be able to do that. But yeah, it was just interesting to be able to see the collection and garments that JAYJAXON has. So I have two. So I'm one of the lucky owners. Lloyd gave it to me, actually. He said he thought that he's like, Rachel, I think that you can do a lot with JAYJAXON. So he gave me the garments and he gave me the portfolio, and I decided to try to share it with you all and share it with the world.
So I think this would liaison well into Ayana's question. Did you find any personal memoirs of JAYJAXON?
So no, I've been asked this before too regarding like JAYJAXON's like personal diaries. I think that Lloyd would have shared these things with me. But because he's given me everything, I think so far of JAYJAXON. But no, I haven't. The only thing that I've been able to do is to unearth stories of things that JAYJAXON has said and done through oral history of his family and friends. That was the only thing that I've been able to do. So no personal memoirs, but to help balance that, I am writing a book on JAYJAXON to help bring his biography to the masses.
So I'm going to circle back to Paula's question.
Okay.
Though advancements have been made in the fashion industry, how do you still experience continued racism in it?
Okay. I can answer that question bluntly. So in a few ways. The first way is economics, right? If you cannot get to have investors really believe in your brand, invest in your brand, when you approach them and you have your board deck, you have your business plan, and all of those things are lined up in place, that's one of the ways. The other way is through banks, right? Banks do not lend through to Black people. It is a very difficult task to try to get banks to lend to you. Even when you do have good credit. And then there's also the setup. And the setup is what I call when you are able to get multiple degrees and have multiple student loan debt, but you will not be able to get a business loan because of the student loan debt. That is the biggest setup of it all. I can't imagine if you're going to school, you have all these degrees, you have your qualifications, you have the knowledge of what it takes to do the fashion side as well as the finance side, and then you're not able to make headway in this way. And then other ways, okay, I see Jasmine's comment, I will. And then there's other ways in which racism plays a place in terms of not being able to get your garments into these major department stores. And I often question why, because the quality of the things that I've seen, let's say when I was in Saks Fifth Avenue, this is in the before times, so before COVID. As a fashion designer, I would take the garments of people that I would view as my competitors, and I would turn it over and I would inspect the inside, like in terms of like stitching, different types of techniques, and it was very basic. It looked like like anything you could buy this at let's say a store that right, Kohl's or like the Gap or something like that. And I thought the price point was alarming. $700 for this garment, and the stitching was so basic. And so I was just like, oh, so you're really paying for the designer's name. You're not even paying for the quality of the garment, that this won't even last you that long. So I think those are some of the ways in which racism can show up and play a place. One of the other things that I can say happened to me most recently, which is super interesting. And I'm going to tell the story as I told this to Jasmine, and I mentioned it briefly to Jaren. And this actually has to do with erasure and how erasure can actually happen present day. So while I do a lot of this work in terms of preserving JAYJAXON's history, information, recently, two things that actually happened. The first thing is there was an article for JAYJAXON. It was released in the New York Times. And the New York Times writer actually came to the exhibition and saw the content, et cetera, interviewed me, et cetera. So the New York Times article, I think it stated the following, pioneering Black designer. And so I reached out to them and, and I said, on the main stage of the New York Times, calling JAYJAXON a Black designer in your newspaper is super problematic. And one of the reasons why it is because this is never done to the white designers. You never hear anyone say white designer Ralph Lauren, white designer Marc Jacobs. You never hear that. And so what that allows for is for those designers to be the standard and for JAYJAXON to be the other. And so, and I also said that, I do understand it's Black History Month, but Black people are not clickbait. It's obvious when you look at Jay Jackson's picture, he's Black. It's obvious. I don't think you even need to put this in the title. And once more, the final thing is I also said that crediting and citing where you got this content is super important. You know, the Queens Historical Society should be mentioned in that newspaper article. You came to the exhibition there. The exhibition title should be mentioned in that article. This information didn't fall upon you out of the universe. You acquired it from somewhere. And most importantly, if I didn't do this work, that article wouldn't exist. So like, these are some of the ways in which I've come across like situations where it's interesting because the term microaggressions definitely speaks to this, where you might think that you're experiencing racism and like things that you can't quite prove. That is literally the definition of microaggressions, where you know you're not going crazy, you know it's happening, but you can't quite prove it because you don't know what's in someone's heart, you know, and you can't quite fully say that this is the case unless you truly ask them. But this is not a thing that hasn't happened once. This is a consistent behavior. So yeah, these are some of the things that's happened, and it's happened real time. I learned a valuable lesson that not only should I protect the legacies and history of Jay Jackson, that I also need to protect the work that I'm doing to ensure that I'm properly cited, that I'm properly acknowledged, as well as the places that I do these exhibitions are also properly acknowledged.
So I think Kimberly's question also kind of plays off of this. Beyond your book, how are you thinking about the posterity of Jay Jackson's legacy? Are you recording these oral histories and planning to donate these to an organization to preserve them?
Okay, so what I do have, I have the oral histories. I would need to re-record them again because I would need to ask permission to have that content initially released. So if I re-record them again, I can have the transcripts and content released that I can preserve them, like maybe like the Library of Congress or something like that. I think that, or even on the Schomburg content can be stored there. I definitely want Jay Jackson's information and history to definitely be preserved also in a few different places. So this is something that I learned through curatorial studies when I was getting my master's degree in Paris. You know, I was talking to one of my professors. I was like, hey, I want to give some of this content to them. And he's like, no. And I asked, I was like, why not? He's like, you know, Rachel, what museums might do is take the content and never show it to anyone again. He's like, this might happen. So he told me, he's like, you know, Rachel, try to do everything it is that you want to do with this content. Bring it everywhere that you can. And, you know, when you're finished, then you can give it a home. So yeah, so I would love to give Jay Jackson's content a home. Because right now it's with me, you know, and I'm not at home. I would prefer that it be in a professional institution. Yeah, and that way also other people can do research, they can access it, they can build on content, build on ideas, write essays, academic writing, and so on and so forth. So yeah, in future, I do want to try to do a bigger exhibition when I acquire some Jay Jackson garments. So the thing I need to do one before I do the other. So I'm still working on that. I hope that COVID ends soon.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Being one of the person who frequently gives the tours at the Queens Historical Society during when we were open, we would frequently get visitors who said, "Oh, I know Jay Jackson. I interacted with him. We were friends in school." What is it?
You have to introduce them to me.
I believe they had already mentioned that they had talked to you.
Oh, okay, good. Okay.
But with all of these people who are out there who Jay Jackson has had an impact on their lives, how do you go about making sure that all of those narratives also get captured?
So here's what I've also done. I make sure that, I give you a twofold question. In the 8 recorded interviews, I made sure to go back and speak with Jay Jackson's friends and intentionally make sure that they were placed in the exhibition. Because I thought, you know, it's so much better for the people who actually know Jay Jackson to speak about their experiences with Jay Jackson, which is, I know, Jaron, you've seen the video. So that is something that they do speak about in the video. So that's one way. The other way is, while writing the book, one of my goals is to continue to bring in their oral history and their content into the actual book. Like, I plan on quoting them. You know, in fact, I would say last year, Jaron, I didn't quite share this with you, but I can tell you now, throughout the pandemic, I think I did like 10 plus interviews with additional family members and friends. I did forget to tell you about that. And yeah, when I interviewed, this is his nieces and nephews, and some of his other additional friends that, you know, came across my path, or, you know, I researched them and so on and so forth. So yeah, I want to be able to bring their stories to the forefront while it's kind of like I want to have their voices speak life into JAYJAXON in the book. Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a continuously growing exhibit.
Yeah, it's growing. It's growing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps up all of the questions that we have. Do you have any last words, Rachel, before we wrap up?
Yes, I just want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about JAYJAXON. It's always a joy of mine to be able to speak about his history, because by being able to have spaces to do this continues to keep his legacy alive. Yeah, and I just hope that more people in the world, whether they be children to adults, can be inspired by JAYJAXON's legacy and what he's built, and for them to know that their dreams are valid as well. Yes. And thank you to the Queens Historical Society. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, President Paula Edmaid. Thank you to the Links Incorporated. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you all.
All right. And thank you, Rachel, for bringing all of this to our attention. It's been wonderful.
You are beyond welcome.
So I'm going to send it over to Paula once more to give us our wrap-up send-off. All right. Oh, Paula, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Sorry. I was just so enthralled with everything that Rachel was saying. And Rachel, thank you so very, very much. Two things. One, we look forward to your book, and hopefully we'll be able to feature that and do a session with you once that book comes out. We look forward to that. And it's ironic. I live in Laurelton, Queens, and his burial site is like, I can't tell you how many yards away from me down Springfield Boulevard. So I've got to look into that myself. I live in a historic area where his remains actually exist. So thank you so very, very much. It was an amazing exhibit. It was so appropriate that we celebrate the accomplishments and challenges of JAYJAXON, and the racism and the discrimination that he encountered, and certainly that we know that continues today, and that you're experiencing as a young up-and-coming designer. We certainly hope that that's going to change, and I know change is gradual, but we certainly hope that it's changing and it's coming. I want to also thank Jaron for his expertise and his IT skills and his narrative. We certainly appreciate him joining us. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the Greater Queens Chapter Arts Facet, the chairpersons of the Facet, the members of the Facet, for continuing to raise the bar, providing these opportunities for our enlightenment and for our growth. And I certainly want to thank the Queens Historical Society for hosting us this afternoon, bringing the 50th anniversary of JAYJAXON's World of Couture to the Women of Greater Queens chapter of the Links Incorporated, and to our guests. And to our guests, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to you joining us in the future. We're co-hosting a couple of events that are coming up soon, in fact, in the next 2 weeks, that center around COVID-19 and hopefully us getting out of this, and the vaccines that are out there for us to take. One takes place on March 18th, the Emerging Perspectives on COVID-19 Pandemic, what you need to know about the vaccine, the clinical trials, and the community practices. And the following week on February 25th, for the forum entitled From the Front Lines, hearing from experts about the truths and realities of the vaccines. The Links Incorporated, specifically Greater Queens, we want to arm our community with the information that will empower them to make the right decisions for themselves and for their families. So I thank everyone once again this afternoon for joining us, for participating. This has been a great afternoon. For those of us who want to learn more and more and more about our history, our role in history, certainly our role in fashion and the fashion industry. So thank you very much. And everyone have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.